Good afternoon. Welcome to the last session of the 2017 AME conference. It's been great so far, and I feel very fortunate to have this panel of industry experts. I'm Deborah George, and I am the AME sector coach for the Elk Grove Unified School District. And thank you. I have my support group here. And I'm here to moderate this panel, and I feel very fortunate, the people that we have here. So, and some of you have sat on other panels. I'm not sure that Tony is here, but I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and give us a journey statement. I know that we've heard from Milton very recently here. And just kind of let us know, how did you get to your current position, your education, career moves, any stories or pivotal experiences that led you to where you are today. So we'll go ahead and start with Milton.
Hi, my name is Jack Mitchell. Just kidding. Jack is my buddy. I like picking on him. But no, my name is Milton Bowens. As you guys probably have just heard, the 510 designation that I use in my signature is because I'm the fifth boy of 10 children. 5 boys, 5 girls, fifth boy and the 10th child. But when I was born, that wasn't Oakland's area code. They got it switched. So but for me, it's just a subtle reminder that nobody kind of ever really reaches their station in life without a support network, and mine just happened to be my family. So it's kind of like every time I sign a painting, it's like I'm saying thank you to my family for supporting me in my endeavors as trying to be an artist. So, yeah.
My turn? Hello, everybody. I'm Anthony Soto. You can call me that. I am a freelance scenic artist in Los Angeles. I am also a member of Local 729, which is the Scenic Painters Union, as well as Local 33, which is the local stagehand union in Los Angeles. I guess I started pretty young. I loved drawing when I was little. It was kind of my favorite pastime whenever I was bored. Whenever I was disinterested in a specific class or subject, I would begin to draw. I really got into scenic art, set design, production aspects of scenic art. When I got to high school, I wanted to be an actor. And so as I spent a lot of time in the theater, I had my high school drama teacher tell me that, you're not just going to hang out here. So he put me to work, essentially. I started painting sets, and I realized that I really, really enjoyed it. I moved on to junior college and did the same thing. I walked up to the technical director at Santa Monica College and let him know that I really want to paint. I was still pursuing acting at the time, but every show that I was a part of, I was also a part of either the paint or the build or really anything. And I taught myself a lot about, or I didn't teach myself, but I made myself learn a lot of things. I was, without knowing it, grooming myself to become a technical director. Learning things like lights, just easy stuff, hanging stuff, focusing, audio, things like that. I later went on to, I transferred to a 4-year Sacramento State. Nobody? So yeah, I went over there. I did the same thing, essentially. I was still, that was around the time when I realized I would stop pursuing acting and I really wanted to delve into becoming a scenic artist full time. I was a scene shop assistant, was my official title, but unofficially, essentially, I led a lot of the scenic art projects for most of the productions at both Santa Monica College and Sacramento State. Graduated in 2013, moved back to LA, which is home for me. And I got a job as a technical director for just a small children's theater company in El Segundo. I was in charge of every aspect of production, including, which started with the design process, the build, the paint, and then running the crew and eventually striking the show. We would do 4 productions annually. And it was there that I got like the biggest break of my career. And that was that I met one of the parents of the children, had a contact who was in the industry. And up until that point, I'd only worked theater. I had no idea that there's this whole other world, motion picture industry. I never fathomed that I would ever be in the motion picture industry. I figured I would be a freelance scenic artist, set designer for the theater. But anyway, I got in touch with this guy. I researched him, and he was a set coordinator for some of my favorite shows, and I was like kind of starstruck in a way. I gave him a call. I didn't necessarily call him for a job. I just kind of wanted to pick his brain, and he went ahead and gave me some lady's phone number. She owned a scene shop in the Valley, told me to give her a call and to not stop bothering her until she gave me a job. So I called her literally, 10 to 12 times in a week. I left maybe 7 or 8 voicemails. She finally answered. I got a meeting with her, and the very next day she put me to work. 2 months after that, she kind of approached me, took me to the side and said, I've got this really important show coming up, and I'd like to have you on the crew, but it's a union show, and so I'm gonna have to start giving you your days. And at the time, I was like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, that sounds great. I had no idea that it was sort of unprecedented that somebody who had no idea about the industry as far as motion pictures was concerned would get an opportunity like this 2 months into ever working in the industry at all. And I had a lot of guys walking up to me and congratulating me, and I was like, okay, cool, thanks. That's great. But anyway, I got 21 days working on the show. It was the 87th Annual Academy Awards.
Oh.
That was really cool. I ended up doing, I don't know if anybody watched that, but Lady Gaga had this Sound of Music thing. So I was part of the crew that did we did like 20 birch trees or something, 50-foot tall birch trees. I was part of that crew. And then we also did the statues that were like 9-foot statues. I believe there was like 94 of them or something like that. And they've been reusing them ever since. And that was kind of my first introduction to even finding out that there are unions that are really beneficial to, tradesmen. 2 months after that, the same guy that gave me her number called me in to be on his crew for a show called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend on the CW. I ended up getting it. You guys like that show? I watched the first 3 episodes just because I worked on it. I wanted to check out but I got to episode 4 and I never pressed play. It was cool. The sets were, yeah. I mean, technically it's great. Yeah. Thank you. So anyway, I ended up getting my days on that show. You're supposed to get, if you guys want to ask a little more about that, I think it's important to note. You need to get 30 days within a calendar year, and then you're eligible to pay your initiation fee, and then all of a sudden you're in this union, and that was a huge benefit to me ever since. I've been extremely lucky. I've been very busy. I've been working studios like Fox Studios, Paramount Studios, every day that I go to work. I mean, they're early days and they're extremely long, but I'm very happy to do what I do. So thank you.
My name is Diane Kwan. I'm an event producer, senior coordinator at Viacom. Just to give you, some of you are from the memory from the last session, so I'm a little embarrassed to repeat myself. But what we do is the internal events. I work on the internal events team, and we produce the events for across networks. So MTV, Comedy Central, VH1s, sort of that kind of thing. My job, I end up traffic copying a lot. So a lot of it will be like me connecting with integrated marketing, sales, and then production and design to put together what our event is. So we'll do builds, we look at ground plans, we do layouts, we pitch to the clients, and that's how we make things happen. That's how we use visual artists and designers. I wanted to be a poet, and I ended up doing this. So just career changes all around. But I worked in book production to start out with, and then I was a bartender for a long time because I didn't want to do that anymore. And then I worked in talent management, and all of those jobs kind of helped me develop a skill set to do what I do now, in terms of like multitasking and stuff like that, and working with lots of different kinds of people. So anyway, there you go.
I'm Jim Evans. I'm a 3D animator by trade at this point. I'm actually becoming a educator. So I'd actually like to applaud all of you educators out there because you're teaching me a lot that I have no clue about. So I'm coming from the industry into education. It's quite a big change. I've always enjoyed doing art ever since I was little. I would do lots of little drawings, just probably thousands of them my mom still has. I got older, I got into a heavy metal band, had hair down to my waist. Nice. Then got into school and got into theater arts, where I got into theatrical makeup, doing stuff like prosthetics like you would see in Face Off and such. Worked on several plays for that, continuing more art stuff. Then I got in my late 20s, and my dad passed away, and it kind of really threw my entire life off track for a little bit. And I was working retail, working at GameStop, which at the time was in EB Games. Before that was in Electronic Arts, going back and back. And met a lot of cool people while I was working in the Northgate Mall in Marin County. I met George Lucas several times, came in there and bought things. But more importantly, there was a lot of industry people that came into the store to buy their games. They wanted to play something somebody else made. And it'd be funny because you watch every once in a while, one guy would come in from one company and they were buying this person was buying their game, and they're like, oh, you should know about this thing, and they'd go to side and talk. And I always thought that was really neat. One of the guys that came in a lot of times, his name was Chris Mitchell, and he was a animator for Industrial Light and Magic. I didn't notice at first, and he would just come in and just talk with me. He was a really cool guy. And he was like, started talking about where he is. I'm like, wait, you work at ILM? And he goes, oh yeah. And it was like nothing big deal. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a trucker type attitude about it. I'm like, well, what have you worked on? He's like, oh, well, let's see. I worked on Men in Black. I did The Phantom Menace. I worked on this. Transformers. He's got some very iconic scenes in that he's animated. And he's like, you want to come by tonight in the studio? And I'm like, yes. So I went to ILM, which I was first like, oh my God, this is incredible. And he took me to his desk, and at the time they were working on Van Helsing, and he was working on one of the final scenes. If you've seen that movie, he goes, even though it's not a great movie, it's got some good animations. But it was the final scene where it was Hugh Jackman holding, I forget what her name was, and he's transferring back from, sorry if it's a spoiler too, from a werewolf back to himself. And he's showing me this whole thing. He goes, now let me tell you something kind of interesting about this scene. He goes, you see Hugh Jackman's butt right here? They actually had to digitally paint out divots on his butt because it's not this smooth really. So just a little FYI. But he kind of inspired me to go, wow, I really like, showing me all the tools and how he did the animations and how much work it was, and it just looked like a lot of fun. So I started researching it. I went back and forth between thinking about the Art Institute or the Academy of Art. I finally went with a decision for going to the Academy of Arts, San Francisco, and got signed up for that. Went through the journey of everything, learned more in 4 years than I ever thought I would ever learn. My drawing skills increased by about 10 times. I learned all through animation, had some incredibly good teachers there. Got out of the academy, couldn't find work as going into just getting a job, like hired, I work 5 days a week or what have you, and then crunch time thing. I was working a little bit of freelance stuff here and there. I was doing some testing for some of the local guys. maybe doing some cleanup animations on the side, but couldn't find an actual job. So I got into doing indie developing, which is independent development for video games. I was working with people that were in Washington, working with people that were in Texas, and we all came together and were working on games. The only one that I've had actually go far enough onto a sale is just a recent one. It was called Shepherds of the Abyss. It's up on Steam, actually. Maybe has 50 sales on it. It's not that much. It's a little tower defense game, but I did all the little creatures for it. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And it's been okay, but it hasn't been a steady paycheck. So I moved into thinking, well, maybe education would be something to do. I talked to one of the people at Windsor High School, and he got me started on doing this animation workshop where the kids during their junior and senior year had to do when we were young, we had to do community service. They follow a mentor for X amount of hours, learning about the process of what that professional is, and then write a thing about it for the front of presentation. Well, they're having kind of a bad success rate on it, so they started doing these workshops where they had professionals like me come into the industry or into the classroom and teach a class. So I would teach a class on animation for 10 weeks, 2 hours. We met every Wednesday, and I would teach kids as much as I could and was getting a final product by the end of the sessions. So I've done this, I just wrapped up my 4th year of doing that recently, and just figured out that I really like education. I got my substitute teaching credentials last year, and now they're talking about they want to maybe have me teach a class, which is a very overwhelming thing, especially when I've been learning everything I've been learning from all of you. So it's a brand new journey, and that's where I'm at now.
So we have a couple of questions that I think some of this was covered maybe in what you gave as your journey statement, but maybe you can think of a pivotal event or something that really made you turn to the position that you are now. Thinking of the educators in the audience, I would be interested too to hear, we always struggle with what to tell our students about going into the arts as a career, and maybe putting yourself back in your high school years, thinking what was something that was really, had a big impact on you in your high school education that led you to even choosing this as a career option. Anyone can start. And
Anybody? Okay, well, I certainly wasn't financially aware when I decided I want to be an artist. I'm sorry. I think probably the pivotal moment for me, I was 19, I was in junior college. I was painting sets for Santa Monica College. I had a friend of mine who was a working stage manager, and she said that she was working on something that they needed a set designer for. I hadn't really designed a set up until that point. I always just painted whatever the director kind of needed me to paint. But this was kind of an interesting challenge, and it seemed like high stakes at the time. But looking back now, it was just some small theater company in downtown LA, and the play was called Safe. I was painting it, and I realized I needed to very thoroughly read the script at this point, as opposed to just memorizing highlighted lines. I had to read it twice. I had to come up with a set that was functional, and then I had to come up with my own aesthetic for it. It's a design concept essentially, and it was very challenging. It was very rewarding as well. And I think it was one of the days that I was working. I was working a really late night. I was by myself in the theater, and I was looking around, and I was like, this is really cool that like I'm sort of in charge of putting this thing up, and I'm doing things that I really love doing. I get to paint really huge, and that was probably the moment for me when I realized, I think I'm gonna move this from plan B to plan A.
So I've been in my current position for about 6 years, and I just had this realization the other day that I'm a corporate person. And it's funny because so I work with a lot of the things that we do, because I work on all these ancillary events that are connected to like a TV show, which is connected to commercials, which get funded by advertising dollars. So I work with a lot of we'll do like ground plans or whatever, and we do layouts, but a lot of it is like sponsor integrations and incorporating their logos. And it's so funny to me when I'm talking to my art director or my designer, and they're like, I went to grad school, and all I'm trying to figure out if this is the right Doritos logo. Like if this if this is what's important. You know what I mean? And for me, like the reason I love my job is because it's a lot of instinct and adrenaline, right? And one of the things when we work with designers is not just like, well, first of all, we want it to be beautiful. But we also need it to be really functional. And those kinds of details are the things that honestly like excite me. It's like, well, I know this looks good this way, and I know that you hate that, that the coat check has to be in this line because it ruins your entrance. However, I need it to be functional because I have 1,500 people coming in here in the middle of winter, and I need a coat check. And I need it to be fast, because if they're going to wait an hour and a half, that's the thing they're going to talk about. I don't know. That was something for me, like when I first started doing this, and then understanding how all the different components relate to what I do, and the thought process that goes behind it in terms of design, production. There you go. I'm not hitting on all cylinders right now.
That's great, and we can take questions from the audience.
So I kind of have a
too,
question
so-
for all of you, just because in the teaching aspect, I'm excited to be able to tell my students some of the options, because sometimes you think about, like, I paint murals too, and so I love painting large, and I'm trying to get my art club, and we've been painting murals on campus.
Nice.
Kind of, enhancing that, like, oh, there's other things other than just drawing on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But my question for all of you is, what is like your brainstorming process? Because you all have different avenues of the media and arts and stuff, so I was wondering, because my students absolutely hate thumbnails. They hate the brainstorming process. They're like, why do I have to do this? It's like, well, because your first idea is probably not just your best one, and you have to keep trying. So I'd be interested to know what you do specifically for your brainstorming before you create a work of art or a logo, or any other thing.
Well, I'll tackle that one. Because I went to an art school in my professional career of creating work, I try to do nothing that I learned in school. So so like the biggest thing that drives me when I'm getting ready to do a new collection of works, and I very rarely would do one piece unless I'm commissioned to do one piece. If I'm not commissioned to do one piece, I usually work on in increments of 5. So it's like the numerology thing. So I'm doing 5, 10, 15, 20 pieces at one time. So I storyboard them like I would do, like filmmakers do. So I'll look at a moment of history or a particular subject matter that I want to tackle, and I storyboard it in a journal. So I'll basically do a creative writing. Sometimes it's poetry, sometimes it's, satirical essay, and I write first. Then I go back in and fill in the gaps and say, can this segment of what I said make a good picture? And then I'll do a little quick thumbnail that your kids hate on what I want, the icons I want to be involved, what the layout should look like, if I'm going to be dealing with, symbolism like the American flag, and so it comes out. So I have journals of collections that I haven't even actually turned into artwork, just because after I've done all of it, I'll be like, yeah, I'm good. So it never comes to art. So, but it's a filmmaking process because I just love movies. So, and I had bought a Spike Lee book. He had published a book on Do the Right Thing. And I bought it and it had his storyboards in there. And I was like, oh man, that looked like what I do. And then so it connected for me. So, Ken Burns, Spike Lee are probably my 2 biggest influences, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with Ken Burns, a documentary person. So if you look at my artwork, Ken Burns is very clever of holding your attention as a filmmaker, because when he's dealing with history, everything is in black and white. But when he's interviewing an heir or a descendant or talking about the present day ramifications of that moment in history, everything is in bold color. and he's talking like in the right time right now. So I take that same approach in my paintings. When I'm dealing with the history and the icons, it's all those black and white photos. The text is always laid over a colored, rich background. And then that's when I squeeze people back in like Rauschenberg or Franz Klein or Rothko. So, yeah, you just really just took the time and just looked at my picture. I mean, you know, I'm a typical artist. I'm cheating. I'm biting from everybody in art history. I'm just doing it in small segments at the same time. So.
I would like to speak to that just because my job is incredibly collaborative, and I think that's really important to teach kids early on. So, so the two biggest things I do all year is I do a music festival at South by Southwest, and I do another one at Comic-Con here in San Diego. So what we do first is we think about who the audience is going to be, right? And so we design the grounds for that purpose. Like the kids that are at South by are going to be different than the folks that are coming in Comic-Con. They want to do different activities on the ground. So then what we do is we look at the space. And so it's like the event producers, the production people, and then the people from the show. And then we carve that out in terms of like who's going to get what spaces. How are we going to make this all work? Where are we going to put food? How does all that flow work out? And then we work with integrated marketing, who get the money to pay for the things. And then each of these sponsors get like a 20 by 40 space. And then how do we design that to make it fun? Not Logopalooza, because, but at the same time, like, I mean, this is what pays for it. It's disheartening, but it is what it is what it is, you know? So then it's our designer's vision. And then we talk about, I need production's view because I need to know what it is to build it, how much staff we're going to need, if it's affordable, and you need all of those perspectives. So, I mean, I hated group work also in high school.
You're the one doing everything?
But I think, and we talked about this in the last session, I think that like, what helps like in the workforce is that like we're all assigned certain roles, so we know what we're doing. Like I'm there for the events perspective, I'm there for like event flow, I'm also there to represent my clients in integrated marketing so that like, what the sales has sold to the sponsors are represented the way that they've sold it. And you know, my production person is the person who like does the build and the budget or whatever. And so that's how we work together. And the designer is the same thing. Like I need them to deliver renderings and ground plans in a timely fashion and keep that schedule. And it's also my job to protect them. You know, like, can you turn around revisions in 2 days? Is that cool? You know, can you replace this? It's, you know, so it's helpful to know what everyone does. But being able to collaborate and giving people roles, I think, so that they understand what their job is, I think is important because you're going to have to do it for the rest of your life no matter what. You're going to have to work with other people unless you're lucky enough to just be an independent artist who's just working on your own.
Yeah, I try to stay away from people.
If you can do it, do it.
I know some of the courses that I've sat in myself, listened to, was for people wanting to do education for teaching animation to their students. When I'm doing this basically crash course in Maya that I've been doing, I try to get a class going with storyboarding. Luckily, usually by the time I hit my curriculum, they have already done storyboarding. They know how to storyboard, so I can go in there, okay. And actually the approach I teach is almost identical to what Milton was talking about, where I have them, if they can't visualize something, write it down. Write down like what is going on in the scene. Who are these people? Why are they there? What are they doing? And I said, and then you get to go stop people. You can go and film people and how they move everything for animation. Or you can sit in front of a camera yourself to figure out how you want to actually have something. Actually, it's my reference for myself is my favorite thing is I film myself in the actions of what I'm doing. And then I have that running usually on one monitor while I'm animating another.
Well, as a union scenic artist, I just show, there are set designers, and so I just show up and do. But when I was doing freelance set design myself, what I would do is definitely much like what Milton does. I would borrow from I would research productions. I would come up with, first and foremost, a functional set, a set that a director can block around, and it's collaborative as well. There would be 2 or 3 production meetings before I ever even come up with an aesthetic a palette or a concept at all. It's just where the director's going to want to block their actors and things like that. At that point, I'm working with the inventory that we have as well. I mean, there's not a huge budget in most theaters, so I'm focusing on what our inventory is, what we can make with that. And after a couple of production meetings, I just kind of hope that I get inspired with some type of design concept. And so far, I've been fortunate to not draw a blank. But yeah, it's a creative pursuit, and so I'm doing things. I'm doing 5 things at a time. I'm researching stuff. I'll pull my guitar out and I'm playing my guitar and coming up with stuff. I'm drawing anything, and then it just sort of happens. Usually late at night. That's the night owl stuff. I try to be an early bird, but all my creative stuff is night owl stuff. And then whenever I'm doing a large mural, which it's been a while, I just sit and I sketch until I like something, and then I'll slap it up on a thing, on a canvas, on a wall, and it could change as well. Yeah. You're welcome.
I have another question. No one else.
Go for it.
Okay. So I guess my next question would be, so other than the scenic, you just kind of answered my question for you, but do most of your clients give you, like when they want something commissioned or something that you create for them, do they give you a vague explanation of what they want, or do they generally give like, I need this, 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 and this? So I'm trying to figure out, like, as far as when I come to making, so I'm trying to get my students to be a little bit more problem solvers, a little bit more critical thinkers, because they want the answer spit out for them. So if I should be going more of the vague, like I need something that, represents freedom, and then they have to create something from that, or do your clients specifically tell you like what they want?
Well, for me, it varies. Like, when you're dealing with like the NBA, the NFL, or Major League Baseball, it's a nightmare because players have attorneys, the team has attorneys, and the league has attorneys. And I'm telling you, man, I just waited. And it was fortunate that I have a process that I can actually work pretty quickly based on the technique I've developed over the years. Because I just got to a point when I was dealing with the 49ers Commission, I just said, I'm going to wait. Because every time I would get an okay, 2 days later, I would get a retraction of that okay. Because they would send me, now first of all, I work with photo reproductions, which means those photos have been taken by a different photographer. That photographer has a copyright on their work. Now, that photographer might work for AP, that photographer might work for Sports Illustrated, that photographer may work for the team. So that has to be cleared first. So once they get that clearance, then that has to be cleared with the player's agent, because some players have in their contract that anytime you use their image, they get paid for the use of that image. So all they have to do is just basically say the photographer took it, but you're using it, pay me. So it got to a point where I just said, you know what, let me just wait. Because if I would have gotten started and start my process, and then they say, no, hold on, Jerry Rice people didn't clear his photo, then I would have to go back and change him, which is changing a big 8 by 9 foot painting. And it's not always easy to do. So I got nervous though, because I had to wait for such a long time till I finally got down to the final thing. And then I learned in this process that the player doesn't have as much power as the organization, and the organization doesn't have as much power as the league. So I just waited to hear from the NFL before I finally finished the commissions. And that's across the board. That's Major League Baseball, that's the NFL, that's the NBA. Now, when you're dealing with a specific person, like you start to learn a little bit about people. So like when I got the Charles Barkley commission, Charles Barkley really wanted stuff about the civil rights history of Alabama, opposed to Michael Jordan wanted stuff about his career. And that just kind of tells you a little bit about, how people think and what they actually want preserved for them. Typically, like if I'll get a commission from somebody, it's always based or rooted in something personal. So And I want to be candidly honest and just be forthright. I hate commissions. I really do. I take them because I know they're important to my career and they pay very well. But I much rather prefer not being under the pressure of delivering something for someone. That's why I could never do a tattoo. Couldn't do it. I'd be scared to mess up on somebody's body. So for me, I do them because, full disclosure, they pay extremely well, and I know people appreciate my process of capturing history because that's become my niche, telling that historical story. But it's a nightmare for me, man. It's just, I'm not comfortable doing it.
I mean, I always say, like, my designers are not necessarily always wanting to do the things that I'm asking them to do. You know, make me a magical forest with Reese's peanut butter cups logos all over it. You know, like, we'll put a unicorn in there. And that's what we did. We did that. But, like, and so that's the fun part about it, you know? Like, but, you know, sitting there considering logos and, like, what style guides to use and, like, whether or not I can, you know, this font, the stupid font that we purchased from some 14-year-old in his basement is actually legible, you know? Because they don't think about that for event signage, they think about that for, like, the show. I think, for me, like, it depends on the client. Like, Doritos will be like, we want it to be bold, you know? Or, like, Reese's will be like, we want it to be, like, a family-friendly thing. And I do think, like, teaching them as much as you can to think critically, because as I was saying before, you can't teach someone how to think. And if you want to work, the thing that we look for I look for someone who thinks. You know what I mean? Who isn't just like, go move that box. Like, oh, hey, if I move that box, do you need all the boxes actually moved to that area? Like, that's what I'm looking for. Same thing, I think, if you're going to be a designer, like, if you're going to make something, like, what's the functionality behind it? Like, think, what are the questions that I'm going to ask you and have that answer?
I think it's the same with animation. It's
Sorry.
That's okay. With animation, it's one of those things for myself, I've had clients as vague as telling me, okay, I need these 6 characters and I need them to have walking, running, and shooting and dying animations. And then it's up to me at that point to go, okay, how heavy is this character? But that's something that kind of comes with experience. With the students, now with like my animation class that I've done, I put out some vague things with not vague really, but kind of some details with the kids. Like this last one I did said anywhere between 6 to 10 seconds of a scene. No more than 10 seconds. And people are like, well, if I want to do 30 seconds, I said, you're never going to finish it in this class. Mm-hmm. So you have to hold them within certain restraints, but then also get some vague stuff. I had kids that had stuff from a guy who made Batman jump off a building and land on the ground to a very typical walk cycle. I had a kid use a very intricate gun model that he found. Then he had it have the unloaded or the unshot bullet come in, load up, fire, and then had this whole procedure, and it looked great, and it was totally different than what anybody else did. So I think some creative freedom is really good with the students to leave with that, but make sure they still have some boundaries they have to stay within.
Anthony, do you want to, you made an interesting comment earlier about joining the union or getting the hours that made you eligible. So it seems like we're talking about where creativity merges with practicality, or, you know, so that sort of sounds like something that you were.
Yeah, no, the reason I brought it up is because I think it's very important, and it would be very beneficial to a lot of students who are interested in joining the industry, the motion picture industry. First and foremost, you're going to want, as a tradesman, to be protected by these unions, these trade unions. And it's going to be very... If you kind of ingrain in your students that this is their overall goal, it's going to be much easier for them to persevere through the low times. And I mean, they're going to have to, when they're starting off, they're going to have to, you know, take low-paying jobs or no pay, doing jobs for no pay, just to get photos just to get a resume going, just to get a name for themselves at first, and it's gonna seem very dire unless they realize that this is what I have to do at this point, and then once I get a good portfolio going, I can enter the union in that, or I can get into the industry, and then once you're in the industry, I would have benefited knowing what I need to do in order to join these unions. And what you need to do is the following. A lot of the unions are going to be slightly different. They'll vary, but the union that I joined, Local 729, is a set painters union, and you just need to get 30 days within a calendar year, within 365 days. And once you get those days, you then become eligible to join that union. And I think the same is true, or I know the same is true for Local 800, which is a scenic artists union. They do more murals and theater. They do more backdrops. There is more work in 729, which is why I kind of put 800 off to the side and started working on 729, because I've gotten more work from them. And there are other things as well.
So I don't really know exactly what that union thing means, and I don't know which.
Like, he got super lucky, by the way.
Yeah, it's sort of unprecedented.
Guaranteed to have a certain amount of work.
That's not the case. What it is that they guarantee you good wages, and then they allow you to think about your future as far as putting aside retirement, pension, and then you get really good medical and dental benefits as well. So essentially,
Required to hire you?
Only when I have to.
yeah.
Because union jobs pay more.
They pay more, and it's also like, depending on the union that you work with. I'm working in a union house, like, because it'll be like their breaks are specified, their meals are specified, and depending on whether it's a good group or not, like, it'll literally be like, oh, break time, and like they'll like drop a hammer and walk away. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to the other ones where they're really solid. But to his point, what I think, and I said this at the last session too, anybody who's going to have a career in the arts should understand, like, that they should understand that there's a business to it. Like, you have to understand that you're going to be a freelancer at some point. You're basically running your own business. You have to understand, like, how to protect yourself in terms of like negotiating your rate. You have to understand like what the industry standards are in terms of getting paid, or what fashion you're getting paid, how to manage multiple projects. You're essentially running your like a cottage industry of just yourself.
Right.
And I think, like, we all want to make art, and that's great, but we all need to eat. So I think that's one of the things I think that really should be taught. Because I was talking to, sorry, you guys heard this already. I was talking to my designer and my art director when I was on my way over here, talking about like what we should do, and they were like, what we really wish we'd learned in grad school was that, like, how to manage yourself as a business.
Yep.
Like.
Yeah.
Just a thought to kind of bridge the two worlds is, there's the things that, we hear, we know that industry wants, and then there's the things that we're teaching, and then there's this chasm in between, and it almost seems like time to do a curriculum design session with collaboration between folks who are on that side and this side, and actually doing, like, here's what lessons will look like, because we're doing stuff and we're all trying to figure out how to integrate work-based learning skills around, like, learning how to draw, learning how to animate, learning how to do those things, and we're trying to create projects or experiences that these skills are run through, but also attached to these other learning experiences. And so I keep feeling like we're looking for, like, curriculum that doesn't exist or it needs to be designed. And I think it would be interesting to, like, again, kind of keep cycling through, but actually have working.
Yeah, I can see that, because there's definitely
we could walk away with.
There's definitely no curriculum, I don't think, that exists that teaches you about how you're going to take your skills into a business, right? It's just, these are what your skills are, hone these, and then you graduated. Right. But yeah, but then they.
There are some curriculum
Is there?
models that are built around entrepreneurism, and it takes a while to find them, and then how do you place them, or
Okay.
creating aspects of your program so the kids are actually doing work, like, for clients out there and you push them out. Okay, these are the questions you need to ask, and how are we going to, collect money and protect ourselves?
Okay, yeah.
But it's not formalized, it relies on the teacher to seek them out. I'm really interested in, whenever I bring, in that second bullet, whenever I bring experts in, like, first of all, they all say they were never trained well in the business aspect, no matter what, if they did undergraduate or graduate. It's a missing link in my education, whether they went to CCA or, an Arts Institute or whatever. But I'm interested in the aspect of, like, where do you guys know that your context is going to shift and change in 5 years, somehow, some way. Maybe not so much you, Milton, if you're a studio artist, but you still have to keep nimble on your feet in order to.
Well, yeah.
To bring it. So where do you personally see yourselves in 5 years? Like, do you see yourselves jumping industries, or jumping to a different place in your industry, or like in 2017? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, it's funny. I'm gonna answer your question too, but I want to go back to the other question about industry and fine art. Fine art is a weird industry if you're a working, exhibiting artist, because you have, like for me, I've chosen not to have gallery representation in California.
So you have no agent or rep?
Well, I have a rep. I have a representative. I have well, I don't like to call her an agent. She's my representative that books lectures and schedules, keeps my calendar. She facilitates and handles sales, but I don't have gallery representation in California because this is my home state. And I don't like if somebody calls me to have to tell them it has to go through my gallery, because it gives me a certain flexibility, like being able to be here today for Jack. If I had a gallery, this probably wouldn't have happened, because they handle everything that is related to me and my arts. So that becomes a different issue. So the one thing is, like, what the industry pays me. When I say the industry, I'm talking about these commissions. So when I get commissioned by somebody who, is technically a billionaire, or if I get commissioned by a league, they're going to be able to pay me differently than somebody who might be a school teacher. So I can't charge a school teacher $25,000 for a painting. But I'm an artist, and that is the standard of what my work is valued at, because that's what I've made on certain commissions. So it becomes this huge, weird juggling act over the value of your work, who can pay what, and keeping a balance with that. So outside of the state of California, I don't have gallery representation till I get past the state of Texas, because it's all regional. So my gallery is located in Atlanta, Georgia, and they handle me up till DC. So I've chosen not to have representation in New York. I've chosen not to have representation in Chicago, and not to have representation in California. So I allow Avisca Fine Art the latitude to rep me all the way to Arizona, but that's basically on a is it okay with you relationship. But from Atlanta, Florida, all the way up to Washington, D.C., that's Avisca Fine Art. Anything that anybody buys or purchases from me has to come through Avisca Fine Art. If somebody from that region of the country contacts me through my website, I have to refer them to Avisca Fine Art. So it becomes a very restrictive thing to have representation as a fine artist. And then plus they get 50% of every sale. So that becomes, that's just the industry standard for gallery representation. Now, once you build a name and you start bringing clients, or you're, sought after artists, those percentages can be renegotiated to 60-40 or 70-30. But that's typically the situation. Now, the interesting thing about California is that, if I had gallery representation in California, I probably couldn't do the work that I do in the schools, because I'm doing art in the schools. So that work still would all have to go through my gallery, and those contracts would need to be negotiated with my partners, in the industry. So I've made a sound decision and calculated choice that I do want to have an impact with art through education, which probably has made me leave a lot of money on the table, but I look at other ways to make up that through, doing other things, because I went to a public art school, that constantly got its budget cut every year until I graduated. The school I went to is non-existent now. They had to partner with another school just to continue to live. For those of you who are from the Bay Area, it's Arts Far West. But when I went, it was the Renaissance, School of Arts. We're right across the street from CCA, which was CCAA when I went, but now it's CCAA or whatever.
CCAC.
Yeah. So it constantly changes. Now, the thing about where do you see yourself in 5 years, for me, I see fine art being threatened. And this is not just about the dissolving of the National Endowment of the Arts and the National Endowment of the Humanities, because I've never received one of those awards. I've never been a MacArthur Fellowship Award recipient. So when I look at funding programs and I hear people, panic about, them being taken away, I understand why that sentiment exists, but I've never been funded by any of those organizations. So it has never had an impact on me. I've always been to the mindset of that if we are depending on, and art has always been about philanthropy. So if we are looking at philanthropy and we're dependent upon philanthropy, then we need to deal with the percentage of people who can actually afford art and get them to see just how valuable art is. See, most of the time when we look at art, people look at art as this novelty or it's this luxury. But art is functional, and we keep hearing that word from everybody who speaks. Once you get somebody with resources to understand how the functionality of art not only affects their day-to-day, but how it can actually help support their brand or entrench their legacy, you're good to go. So, my next 5 years, I'm going on the road. I'm getting out of the studio, I'm reducing my time in the classroom, and I'm going on the road to be an advocate for arts to be philanthropically supported and not just by government agencies. Every year, and I'm going to get on the soapbox for a second, every year, this time of year, between April and May, just the African American community alone. Now, when you throw in the Latino community, you throw in the Asian community, you throw in the white community, we produce an average of 120 new millionaires into the economy, just through the athletic drafts. 120 new millionaires. Just through the athletic drafts, right? Once again, you don't have to be a math major. If you could get every one of those 120 new millionaires to make a commitment of just $1,000 to be given to their home state or the state where they play collegiate ball to go back into a fund to help support the arts, we could be funded just through the athletic drafts alone. Don't get me started on other ways to get this, to make this happen. But it's doable. But we haven't reached out to these young people. We haven't made them to see that there's a reason why public schools supports the sports and eliminates the arts. And we say, but that don't happen in every community. And we know this. It happens in certain communities. I grew up in East Oakland, one of the worst communities and one of the most threatening communities historically, right? Now, how is it that they can have baseball, basketball, and football, but eliminate their arts? When art saved my life, I would have been in jail if it wasn't for the Renaissance School of Arts. That's where I was headed. But art saved me, I got a wicked jump shot too. But, it was art that saved me, not athletics. All right, I'm gonna stop. I'm sorry.
Oh, 5 years. I don't think you're going to see, well, what I've discovered is a lot of the industry studios have disappeared in the area. I had job opportunities that showed up for myself in LA, all in usually Southern California, which a lot of them either moved there or new ones spawned up all down there. There was a lot of studios that were up in Marin County, including ILM, which moved to the city, and then they shrunk down massively when they got to the Presidio. But there was studios like Factor 5, which produced a lot of good stuff. Trying to remember something else. Nihilistic Software, kind of an unknown one, but they did a lot of good titles for games out there. So I could have moved down there, but at that time in my life, I was married, had kids. My wife is a nurse with Kaiser and makes more money than I can by far. So the option of, and we owned a home, and I'm like, I could get a job down there, sure. So maybe as a younger person, that would be an opportunity to go down there and still be able to have that normal job opportunity. But I think in the future with animators, it's going to be more of a contract type work, which is kind of, there's a back and forth with that, like it's beneficial for some people, and overall though, I think it's kind of a bad thing. I don't think contract work is, I mean, you don't have the benefits out there. So you have all these people, these artists for the digital world that, sure, they can produce all this stuff, but what happens when they're 30 years old, 35 years old, 40 years old, they can't just keep doing contract work. Eventually they're going to want to settle down, they want to have a family, and unless they've built up such a resume that they can work through telecommunication, which I've seen some people get lucky and do that, but it's very, very small. So animation is going to be this weird little thing. I'm also not sure about where it's going to go with comes to VR stuff. The creation of different animations being done within VR. Might stop seeing everything being done with a mouse and keyboard type thing with a screen. It might be stick on your goggles, grab your stuff, and do all your animation, modeling, whatever have you within the entire environment. For myself, of where I am going in 5 years, I'm going to be joining all of you and educating the future. And hopefully bringing stuff that I've learned in the industry to the children, saying, okay, so here's where everything is going. These are things you need to know about. These are things to know, knowing that, if you take contract work, it's going to dry up eventually. You're going to eventually want to stop. So think about that in your future, getting things that aren't taught in the colleges even about, how to sell yourself as a business person, especially if you're in a contract work. I know when I got out of Academy of Art, I had a little bit of stuff through networking to people I knew about how to approach people, and luckily through my retail experience, I knew how to sell myself. But there's a lot of people come out of there, they're artists and they're very introvert. They're fantastic artists, but their social skills are just kind of lacking. And unfortunately the schools, at least in college level, you get a little bit of that in high school. I know we're trying to do more with soft skill stuff, but it's still just not there. So this is stuff that I'm going to hopefully bring to my part of the thing in the next 5 years.
What was it?
Where do you see your specific aspect of the industry headed in 5 years?
The industry, I expect it to still be booming 5 years from now. It's a pretty big industry, and there are certainly a lot of things, and I was told by some of the older heads that there are things that there's less work because there's a lot of graphic arts that is being integrated into the motion picture industry. But I was also just recently on a Chevy ad where, it was a physical set. We had to build this set, paint this set, and there was still CGI over that set. So I'm sure that that happens a lot. As far as myself personally, at this point, I feel like at the beginning, honestly, of my journey. As I'm an entry-level painter right now, but I have a design background. There are local unions for set designers. Actually, the Local 800, you can get in as a scenic artist, work your way up to like a model maker, and then eventually a set designer. That's kind of going to be my game plan for the next 5 years. So hopefully within 5 years, I'm designing sets and saving my back. But I expect there to still be work in the industry for scenic artists, set painters, prop makers, and I expect it to still be. It looks like we're headed in this trend where, and I'm sure you're feeling it too. The industry is very, very busy right now.
Yeah, I'm super
Yeah,
busy.
it's good.
For distraction.
Yeah, that's true.
They're real.
It's really good. I mean, it's kind of the start of it. I feel like it started maybe 2 years ago, and I think we'll feel it for a little while. So 5 years from now, it will still be good.
Clients are asking me a lot about VR and AR.
Yeah.
A lot.
Can I ask you a question? No, yeah, follow-up question to what you said, because I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Being a part of a union, because it sounds similar, like if you're part of a union and you have gallery representation, that's kind of similar. Does that restrict you from being able to do outside projects, being a part of a union?
No, sir, it does not.
It doesn't?
No.
So she can hire you as a non-union worker?
She could hire me as a non-union worker on a non-union show, and I can definitely do that. Yeah.
Okay. So when do you have to use that union status? I mean, because if you can go out and freelance, I mean, I'm trying to
There's
figure this
certain
out.
films that you can't
Yeah.
work unless you're a union.
They won't
Got
let you.
it.
They
It's
won't
more
let you
it's more
on
like
like the
that.
bigger lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bigger lots are.
I would never hire a union.
Are all.
I ain't got that kind of money. I don't have movie money.
No, but I mean, I do feel there are definitely times when I'm not getting work through the local, and I know a lot of people who offer non-union stuff. And again, I didn't really mention it that much, but I mean, I'm also a stagehand, so I get a lot of work at the Broad stage in Santa Monica, just as a techie, over at El Camino College. So I do a lot of other things. A lot of them are non-union, so I am
cool.
free. I'm not constricted by joining one union or another. And there's a lot of people who are dual card holders or are part of two unions.
But some
Interesting.
unions do, like if you're a stage manager.
I believe
you
that's
become a union.
that's
stage
like
manager.
equity, right, or something like
Right,
yeah.
That
That's
particular union, you can't work non-equity jobs
Yes.
if you hold an equity card.
Oh,
People
okay.
do it, but you're not allowed
You're,
to.
yeah, they can come after you.
Yeah, I was all right.
Yeah.
I want to mention, we are at our time, and I know one of our panelists has a flight to catch, but I also noticed that there was a question that you had been wanting to ask earlier. So if
I have a few
anyone,
minutes.
Nate,
Go ahead.
you're okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna comment a little bit on the business curriculum piece and ask a question. Whenever I talk to industry people and the scope and how it's looking for the industry in the future, they're talking about the more diversified artists that can do it all.
Yep.
But I didn't know with union type membership and things like that, if that's relevant to you, if you think that you have more skills and more abilities, that's gonna make you more marketable, or do you feel like the union still is strong?
say that again. I'm sorry.
So they're just talking about being more diversified, so not really specializing in anything.
Okay.
You know, you need to be able to do a little bit of everything, including market yourself, and because the contract work is gonna be more the future, but I didn't know if that's how you all felt.
I mean, there are two. If you join a union, and that's certainly, if you're going to have a specific trade or a specific skill, it's really good to join the union, obviously, because if you can't find work at your specific skill, you know, nobody's gonna take you elsewhere other than that specific sect of what you do. But as far as, I mean, marketing yourself, I think it's smart to do that too, because like I said, I don't always work union. I work a lot of non-union, and so I like to maintain myself extremely well-rounded in every aspect. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of was grooming myself to become a technical director. I still work at a lot of theaters, and I mean, I can see that being a career path that I might switch to, is becoming an educator at a university or you know, college level technical director or set design instructor or something like that.
You'll be better at your job if you can do more things. You'll be more valuable to me if you can do more things. Like my art designers are art directors or set designers, right? That they can do graphics is great. That they can, you know what I mean? Like I'll need someone to do graphics for an entire show. And if you're not willing to do it, especially at the beginning. I mean, when you get to that level where all you do then is set design, then awesome. But like,
But we're talking about students who don't
Yeah.
have a job.
Then, I mean, like, learn, if you're gonna be a designer, do graphics, do like renderings, do anything that you can, because you need the money.
And with an animator, it's definitely true. If you go into trying to be an animator, they're going to ask you to do how to rig. If you know how to rig, they're not going to hire you. So I know how to rig myself because that was part of my schooling that I went through. I also know how to do texturing, lighting, and all other stuff. So I have a lot of skills in that. But if somebody comes in and they only know how to do animation and they don't know how to do anything else, don't know how to meld script, use any program stuff within Maya, you're not going to get hired.
I learned how to sew, cook, and play music. And I say that jokingly, but I do use all of those elements in putting together fine art exhibitions. I had a very large exhibition in Atlanta called Stitches in Time, where it was over 150 small works on paper that I sewed together to make these larger quilts. So they were displayed in components differently, but if you were put all 50 on the ground, all 150 on the ground, it basically told one big story about the African American timeline. So learning multiple skills, regardless of what you do, is always going to benefit you, and it makes you more desirable. When I tell a curator of an exhibition that I want to include food in my opening reception, and like, what? I mean, they'll do what they can. No, I want to bring some food to add to the ambiance.
Learning how to connect all of those skills to business or art. Because I think a lot of the entrepreneurship curriculum I look at is helping kids come up with a brand new idea and like being that inventor with the. But I think like, hey, if you're good at making brownies and.
But like, I mean,
market that.
I mean, I think like, I mean, being interested in other things makes you better at what you do. And also I think we talked about this at the advisory board the other day, like sometimes you don't know what you like. You don't know what you can do until you're forced to try other things. You know, so like if you're in a graphics program or whatever, like do something else. Do something that's completely different, because somehow you'll connect the dots. It'll influence you in a way to work a certain way that you didn't even know that you could do. I mean, go out and like encourage kids to go out and see things, do things. Like, it's not just like what they can create, it's like what else inspires them. Like, they have to be curious.
Okay, well, Chuck said it's the end of the session. I know some people have to go, and maybe some others are going to